What would you do if the person you trusted most laughed while destroying your life in a single phone call? Here, you'll hear stories where betrayal wears a smile, power hides behind money, and silence becomes the most dangerous weapon of all. These are not fairy tales. These are raw, real confessions of love twisted into control, marriages built on lies, and husbands who believed secrets would keep them untouchable. Every story dives beneath the surface into forged signatures, hidden affairs, stolen homes, and the quiet patience that turns pain into strategy. You won't find screaming matches or cheap drama here. You'll find truth, evidence, timing, and endings so devastating they leave nothing to deny. If you believe revenge doesn't always need violence, only courage and truth, you're in the right place. Welcome to Stories Where Silence Wins. The call came without warning, sharp and confident, like it had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. The words landed fast: divorce, house sold, stacked together to leave no room for questions. Then came the laugh. Not nervous, not uncertain, a laugh meant to shrink everything that had ever been built into something disposable. That sound revealed more than the words ever could. It wasn't freedom he was claiming, it was dominance. Money had always been his favorite weapon. Numbers were waved like proof of superiority, accounts kept just out of reach, explanations delivered only when convenient. Trust was treated as weakness, and secrecy was framed as intelligence. Over time, silence was learned, not because nothing was wrong, but because every challenge was met with lectures about gratitude and sacrifice. That phone call was meant to finish the lesson, to prove that control didn't require presence, respect, or even honesty. Humiliation was the point. Ending a marriage wasn't enough. It had to be reduced to a punchline. Selling the house without consent wasn't just theft, it was erasure. Memories, effort, years of compromise were dismissed as if they never mattered. The cruelty sat calmly inside his certainty. He believed money could rewrite reality, that confidence could replace truth, that laughter could end a life chapter without consequences. But arrogance leaves fingerprints. The details didn't add up. Dates conflicted, stories shifted. That sale existed only in his mouth. Documents were unsigned. Accounts led to shadows instead of buyers. What looked like power was really panic wrapped in bravado. Behind the secrecy lived debts, lies layered on lies, and a fragile ego terrified of being exposed. The shocking part wasn't discovering the deception. It was realizing how much effort had gone into hiding weakness. The control he bragged about depended entirely on silence and fear. Once those disappeared, everything else began to crumble. The man who laughed believed the ending was his to announce. He never imagined the truth would speak louder. That call was supposed to make everything disappear, but it only exposed how desperate he had become. The laughter from that call didn't fade. It echoed, replaying itself in quiet moments, begging to be understood. At first, it sounded like confidence. Later, it revealed itself as a cover, the kind used when too many lies are stacked too high and one wrong breath could knock them down. Nothing unraveled all at once. It started with small inconsistencies, papers filed but never discussed, signatures that looked familiar yet wrong, explanations that changed depending on the audience. Trust had trained silence, but betrayal leaves patterns. A closer look at property records exposed names that didn't belong, dates that made no sense, and transactions that required authority he never had alone. One signature stood out, carefully practiced, almost perfect. Almost. Then came the woman. Not a rumor, not suspicion. proof: a phone number saved under a business contact, messages written with intimacy he never bothered to offer at home. She believed promises too, stories about being trapped, misunderstood, preparing to leave, lies recycled and handed out like gifts. What shocked most wasn't her existence, but how confidently he balanced two lives, convinced neither would ever compare notes. The deeper the search went, the uglier the truth became. Properties shuffled between shell companies, loans taken against shared assets without consent, money moved late at night, accounts opened and closed like doors in a hallway meant to confuse anyone following behind. He wasn't just careless, he was reckless, relying on charm and intimidation to keep everything buried. And then there was the weakness. Hidden carefully beneath control and loud certainty was fear. Fear of exposure, fear of numbers not adding up, fear that once the truth surfaced, nothing would protect him. The laughter made sense then. It wasn't triumph, it was desperation pretending to be power. Every forged signature tied back to him. Every illegal deal left a trail. Every lie depended on silence that no longer existed. The man who believed himself untouchable had built everything on secrecy, and secrecy always demands loyalty it can't afford. The most shocking truth wasn't the betrayal, it was how little strength he actually had once the truth stepped into the light. Silence became the safest place to survive. Words were swallowed, not because there was nothing to say, but because saying them too early would have ruined everything. Pain stayed close, heavy and constant, but it was never allowed to spill in front of him. Tears were saved for empty rooms, wiped away before morning, turned into something useful. Every insult, every careless joke, every reminder of who supposedly held the power was stored, not forgotten. There was a rhythm to his cruelty, confidence on the surface, impatience underneath. He spoke freely when he thought control was absolute. That was when the truth slipped out. Numbers mentioned casually, names dropped without caution, stories that contradicted older ones. Listening became a skill. Smiling became camouflage. While he believed victory was already secured, patterns were forming quietly in the background. Endurance was never about weakness. It was about timing. Reacting would have given him exactly what he wanted: drama to discredit, emotion to dismiss. Instead, calm unsettled him. Silence made him careless. He mistook restraint for fear and revealed more with each passing day. Messages went unchallenged. Documents were left within reach. Phone calls were taken loudly, assuming no one was paying attention. Behind closed doors, the strategy took shape. Records were copied, dates were logged, conversations replayed until the lies showed their cracks. Every tear that fell sharpened focus instead of blurring it. The pain didn't disappear, but it transformed into clarity. Nothing motivates precision like betrayal wrapped in confidence. The shocking part was how easy it became once emotions stepped aside. His secrets weren't buried deep, they were hidden in plain sight, protected only by the belief that no one would ever look closely. He underestimated patience. He underestimated memory. Most of all, he underestimated how dangerous silence can be when it stops being passive. When the time came, there was no confrontation, no shouting, no desperate attempts to be understood. Evidence spoke instead. Facts replaced accusations. Calm replaced chaos. The man who once thrived on intimidation suddenly had nothing to stand on. Endurance wasn't about surviving him, it was about outlasting the lies he depended on. Rage was the emotion he expected. Tears, accusations, frantic calls, public scenes, anything he could point to as proof that everything was exaggerated. None of that happened. What followed was quieter, slower, and far more damaging. Truth doesn't need volume when it's documented, dated, and undeniable. Everything had already been gathered. Forged signatures, financial trails, messages never meant to be read outside dark rooms in stolen moments. Each piece on its own looked harmless, almost forgettable. Together, they told a story he could never talk his way out of. Timing mattered. Acting too soon would have warned him. Waiting allowed the lies to settle, to grow comfortable, to become careless. The moment arrived without drama. No confrontation beforehand, no warning. Just papers filed, accounts questioned, and doors that once opened easily suddenly closed. His confidence cracked first. Calls went unanswered. Messages shifted from arrogance to confusion. The man who once laughed on the phone now searched for explanations that didn't exist. The truth hit hardest in spaces he trusted most: legal rooms, financial offices, quiet conversations where charm meant nothing. Every attempt to deny was met with evidence. Every excuse collapsed under dates and signatures. The secret life he guarded so fiercely became public record, stripped of context, stripped of control. What shocked him most wasn't exposure, it was the absence of chaos. There was nothing to argue against, no emotional outburst to distract from facts, no anger to provoke sympathy. Just calm, steady confirmation of everything he believed would stay buried. The power he thought came from money and secrecy vanished the moment transparency arrived. Watching the collapse didn't bring joy the way movies promise. It brought relief, closure, a strange calm that comes from knowing the truth can stand on its own without being defended. His downfall wasn't dramatic because it didn't need to be. Silence did the work. Documents finished the rest. The final blow wasn't a scream or a threat. It was the moment he realized there was nothing left to deny. If this story made you feel something, anger, strength, or clarity, don't keep it to yourself. Hit like so this truth reaches others who need it. Subscribe for more real stories where betrayal is exposed and patience changes everything. And remember, sometimes the quietest ending is the most powerful one.